telling myself one last time that maybe this could be different. The ballroom was stunning. Crystal chandeliers glowed above gold-rimmed glasses and carefully curated smiles. My husband, Finn, walked beside me, hand in mine. I held on tighter than I meant to. The moment we entered, I felt it, the shift in energy. Polite nods, lingering glances, whispers that never reached full words. Scarlett was radiant in white, Owen was loud and charming, the golden children, and me, I was the shadow they always left behind. But nothing could have prepared me for what my father would say tonight, publicly, deliberately, to make sure I knew I was never part of his story. Has your family ever humiliated you in public? Comment below. I know I'm not alone. We sat near the back, where the table numbers didn't matter. I tried to focus on the clink of silverware, the jazz trio playing something soft and unmemorable. My palms were damp. The speeches began. Toasts, polished anecdotes, the kind of curated legacy building my father had mastered. Then he took the stage. Wallace Taylor, former CEO, beloved mentor, family man, if you believed the brochure. I've built companies, he said, but nothing compares to building a family I'm proud of. My throat tightened. Owen, he smiled, your brilliance in finance, your leadership, it inspires me. Applause. Scarlett, his voice softened, your work with children, your sacrifice, you honor our name. More applause. Some guests even stood. And then he looked at me. The smile vanished. His voice, sharp and calm, cut through the applause. You may leave now, Harper. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The silence afterward screamed louder than any microphone. Eyes turned, chairs stilled. Forks hovered mid-air. Finn froze. I sat, rigid. My heart pounded in my throat. I waited for a laugh, a smirk, something to undo it. Nothing came. This wasn't a slip. It was a declaration. I didn't belong. Not in the speech, not in the family, not in the room. But inside me, something snapped into place. I remembered being 12, missing a note at my piano recital. He stood up and walked out. That was the first time he left me on a stage. This was the second. Only now I wasn't that girl anymore. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I sat still, spine straight. Finn reached for my hand beneath the table. I laced my fingers through his. He could erase me from his narrative, but I was done erasing myself. People say memory fades, but the truth is, some memories sharpen over time, like glass ground into the skin. I was 12 the first time I truly understood what I meant to my father. It was the spring recital. I'd been practicing river flows in You on the piano for nearly 2 months. My fingers ached most nights, but I didn't care. I believed, naively, that if I played perfectly, maybe he'd see me, really see me. My mother helped me curl my hair that morning. She pinned a little silver clip behind my ear and said I looked like a young lady. I wore my blue dress, the one with a ribbon at the waist. The satin stuck to my legs in the heat of the auditorium. Wallace sat in the front row, arms folded. Scarlett was beside him, whispering something to Owen, who laughed. When it was my turn, I walked to the piano with trembling hands. My heart pounded in my throat, but I kept breathing. I began to play. It was going well until it wasn't. One wrong note, one single mistake, and the melody faltered. I tried to recover, but it was like falling downstairs. Once you lose your balance, every step hurts more. I looked up. My father didn't flinch. He didn't sigh. He just stood up and walked out. No expression, no explanation, just the back of his coat disappearing down the aisle. Something inside me collapsed, but I finished the song. Somehow. I stood, bowed, and returned to my seat without crying. That was my silent victory. I didn't let the tears fall, at least not there. Later that night, he never mentioned the recital. He asked Scarlett about her upcoming science fair, praised Owen's latest test score, and told me to pass the butter. No acknowledgement, no consolation, no love. That's how he punished me. Not through anger, but through absence. With Wallace, love was a prize, and I'd failed to earn it. It wasn't just that one night, it was a pattern. Scarlett brought home trophies. He took her to dinner. Owen joined the math league. He framed the certificate. I wrote a poem that won a city-wide competition. He glanced at the paper and said, "Does it come with a paycheck?" I laughed. But inside, something wilted. By the time I was 16, I had stopped telling him anything. It didn't seem to matter. And when you live long enough in silence, you start to believe you're the problem. You start to think, maybe I'm just not worth noticing. They say high school is where you find yourself. For me, it was where I learned to disappear. I was 15 when I realized my dreams didn't fit into my father's world. Not because they weren't big enough, but because they weren't his. I loved words. I devoured novels, journaled obsessively, stayed up past midnight, writing short stories by flashlight. My English teacher once told me, "You don't just write well, Harper, you think like a writer." That sentence lived in my chest for weeks. I still remember the day I got accepted into a state-level creative writing program. They only picked 20 students. I had poured everything into that application: essays, samples, recommendation letters. When I opened the email, I cried. That night, I printed the acceptance letter and brought it to dinner. Wallace didn't even look up from his plate. "Creative writing?" he asked flatly. "What do you plan to do with that? Write greeting cards?" Scarlett laughed. Owen smirked. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. I mumbled something about developing my voice and exploring narrative structure, but he cut me off. "You need structure in your future, not in your fairy tales. Focus on something useful." That word, useful, haunted me. From then on, every time I read a book, I heard his voice in my head. Every time I wrote a line I loved, it felt like a guilty pleasure. Scarlett got a summer internship at a local hospital. He bragged to his colleagues. Owen joined the debate team and won one round. Wallace took him out for steak. I stopped bringing up my writing. I stopped leaving notebooks on the kitchen table. I stopped asking for anyone to read anything. By the time I turned 16, I had a folder full of poems no one had ever seen. And I started to believe what he said. That writing was a phase. That passion wasn't purpose. That only results mattered. So I dropped my elective literature class and picked up Intro to Economics. I smiled through career counseling meetings, talking about business degrees I didn't care about. I started molding myself into someone I thought he could love, but nothing changed. Straight A's in classes I hated were met with silence. Once, after a perfect semester, he simply said, "Scarlett's GPA is higher." It wasn't even cruel, it was casual, like it was just a fact. Like I should have known better than to expect anything more. That's when the shame turned into quiet rage. Not the kind you yell with, the kind that settles deep in your bones and makes a silent promise. One day, you'll wish you had seen me, and I won't need your permission anymore. College was a blur. I chose communications as a compromise, just enough creativity to keep me sane, just enough structure to keep my father from scoffing. I graduated quietly. No honors, no celebration, just a handshake from the dean and a missed voicemail from Wallace. By 25, I had a job in publishing, entry level, low pay, but I was reading, editing, touching books. For the first time, I felt alive again. That's when the idea of Lighthouse Press was born. It started small, a blog, then a digital zine, then a tiny team of writers and artists who believed, like I did, that stories could heal people. I worked nights, saved every spare dollar, skipped vacations, and sold old clothes just to keep the servers running. I was proud, quietly, fiercely proud. One evening, after 3 years of grinding, we finally signed our first distribution deal with a mid-sized platform. I was buzzing with adrenaline. I called Wallace. It went to voicemail. When he finally called back, 3 days later, I told him the news. His response? "Are you still doing that online book thing?" I blinked. "That online book thing," I repeated, my voice trembling, "is a publishing deal." There was a pause, then a sigh. "Well, I suppose that's something." That was it. No congratulations, no "I'm proud of you." Just a vague shrug over the phone. I hung up, stared at the wall, and let the ache settle. But the truth is, it wasn't just about work. It was everything. When Mom got sick, I was the one who took her to appointments. I drove her to chemotherapy. I stayed up at night rubbing her back when the nausea got unbearable. Scarlett lived 2 cities away. Owen was too busy. Wallace came to one appointment, stayed for 15 minutes, and left with an excuse about meetings. I showed up every week, every day. And yet, when relatives asked how Mom was doing, Wallace would say, "Scarlett calls her when she can," or "Owen's trying to visit this month," as if I didn't exist. It was like watching someone erase your name from a story you helped write. I didn't want credit. I didn't even need praise. But I needed to matter. And in that house, no matter what I gave, it never felt like enough. Not when I sacrificed sleep. Not when I cleaned up after chemo. Not when I landed publishing deals. Not when I stood completely on my own. In Wallace's eyes, success only came in forms he understood: money, status, titles. But I was building something different, something that wasn't loud but was real. And for that, he had no language, so he gave me silence, again. There wasn't one breaking point, no slammed doors, no screaming matches, just silence, longer than usual. That's how it always was with Wallace. His anger didn't roar. It evaporated into indifference. At 28, I stopped calling, not out of spite, out of exhaustion. There's a different kind of grief that comes when you realize your parent isn't capable of loving you the way you need. It doesn't feel like heartbreak. It feels like gravity, heavy, constant, unseen but inescapable. I still sent birthday cards. I still picked up when he called. On the rare occasions he did, I still showed up at Thanksgiving, Christmas, whatever polite version of belonging we were pretending to maintain. But I stopped reaching for approval. I stopped trying to shine in rooms where no one looked my way. And little by little, I built a wall around the softest parts of me. It wasn't obvious at first. I still laughed, still worked, still loved. But I became selective with what I shared, and with whom. Finn noticed it first. "You don't talk about your family much," he said one night, as we sat on the couch, my head on his chest. "There's not much to talk about," I said. That wasn't true. There was too much. Too many wounds that had never been named. Too many moments I had tried to explain away as just how he is. But I was tired of defending someone who had never once defended me. One night, Finn saw me close my laptop a little too hard. He asked what was wrong. "I got a message from my dad," I said. "What did he say?" I hesitated. "He said congrats on the baby shower." We didn't have kids. Scarlett did. He'd gotten us confused. Finn didn't say anything. He just wrapped his arms around me and held me like something in me had cracked. because it had. That was the moment I stopped trying to be his daughter in the way he demanded. I would always be his biologically, but emotionally, spiritually, I had nothing left to give. There's a kind of peace that comes when you finally stop chasing something that was never yours to begin with. It's not the kind of peace that feels good, but it is the kind that feels real. I stopped waiting for invitations. I stopped hoping for recognition, and I started building something else, something just for me, a space where I didn't have to shrink, a life where I didn't have to earn love, a future where I could be enough exactly as I was. Even if my father never saw it, I did. Moving out wasn't a declaration. It was a quiet decision made in the back of my mind after a dozen unspoken rejections, 100 silences that echoed louder than any no. I didn't slam the door or write a farewell letter. I just packed my life into boxes and left. Wallace didn't ask where I was going. Scarlett didn't offer to help. Owen texted a single thumbs-up emoji, followed by a meme about moving out being freedom disguised as stress. I didn't reply. Finn rented the van. He brought sandwiches. He labeled every box. He didn't ask why I wasn't crying because he already knew. I wasn't sad. I was empty. The apartment I moved into wasn't much. It sat above a laundromat. The floorboards creaked, and the heater clanged like an old man cursing the cold. But it was mine, my name on the lease, my coffee mug in the cupboard, my books stacked in crooked piles beside a mattress on the floor. For the first time in my adult life, I could breathe. But freedom, as I quickly learned, comes with fine print. And the fine print read, "You'll feel lonelier than ever." I had traded a suffocating presence for an aching absence. The silence wasn't loud, it was sharp. Some nights I'd lie awake and wonder if I had made a mistake. Not because I missed home, but because I didn't know if I was strong enough without it. Lighthouse Press became my anchor and my burden. I worked 2 side jobs just to keep the dream alive. Edited thesis papers during the day, stocked books at a local shop until midnight. On weekends, I met with authors at coffee shops, pitching the impossible. Trust me, I have no office, no funding, but I have vision. Sometimes they said yes, mostly they said no. Rejection letters stacked like receipts of failure. The bills kept coming, the clicks on our site slowed. One week, I had $17 in my account and 4 days until rent. That night, I sat on the kitchen floor with a frozen bag of peas as dinner, scrolling through job boards, trying to imagine myself back in a suit, working a job I didn't believe in, just to survive. A thought slipped in, quiet, lethal. Maybe he was right. Maybe this dream is foolish. I hated how much that voice sounded like Wallace. Finn came out, sleepy-eyed, saw me staring blankly at nothing, and sat beside me. He didn't offer solutions. He just said, "You're not crazy for wanting this. You're brave." And in that one sentence, I felt more seen than I had in my entire childhood. It didn't erase the fear, but it reminded me I wasn't doing this alone, and that mattered more than I ever thought it would. It happened on a Tuesday. The email was brief, clinical. "We regret to inform you that due to budget restructuring, our partnership with Lighthouse Press will be suspended effective immediately. No warning, no call. Just a cold goodbye from the only distribution partner we had." I stared at the screen for 10 minutes, hoping it would change. Then I opened our bank dashboard. $213.76. That week, 2 invoices went unpaid. One manuscript we were working on had to be shelved. The website hosting fee bounced. I sent apologetic emails, tightened every corner I could, and tried to pretend I wasn't falling apart. But inside, I was crashing hard. I didn't cry that day or the next. But 3 nights later, I collapsed in the shower. Not from pain, just from the weight of holding everything together. Finn found me curled on the bathroom floor, water still running. He didn't speak, just wrapped me in a towel and held me until I stopped shaking. The next morning, he made tea, sat across from me, and said quietly, "Harper, you don't have to carry this alone." I looked at him, tired, angry. "Who else is going to carry it?" I whispered. "It's my company, my name, my failure." He reached across the table and took my hand. "No, it's our life. Your dream doesn't mean you're alone in it." It wasn't just comforting, it was grounding. That same day, an unexpected message popped up in our email inbox. Lena March, one of the first authors I'd ever published, years ago when Lighthouse was just a hopeful blog. She had gone on to publish 2 more books with a bigger publisher. Her message: "I heard about the pullout. I'm so sorry. I believe in what you built. If you ever want to collaborate again, count me in." I stared at the screen, stunned. Lena hadn't needed to reach out, but she had. Then came another surprise. Riley, the owner of the bookstore I used to work at part-time, texted me out of nowhere. "Still doing publishing? I have a poet here, young, talented, raw. Doesn't trust big publishers. You should talk to her." Within a week, I was meeting this young writer at a cafe. Her name was Amara, 19, fierce, unpolished. She told me she didn't believe in the publishing industry, but she believed in stories that matter. "I read what Lighthouse used to post," she said. "It didn't feel fake." I walked home that night with her manuscript in my bag, and something else I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Not big, flashy hope, but the quiet kind that taps you on the shoulder when you're ready to quit. Finn, Lena, Riley, Amara. One by one, they were proving something I hadn't dared to believe. I wasn't the only one who saw value in what I built. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone after all. It wasn't sudden. The healing came in whispers, in gestures, in people who showed up without asking for anything in return. Finn became my anchor. Not the dramatic, sweep you off your feet kind, but the steady, stay through the mess kind. He never tried to fix me. He didn't offer false optimism or hollow praise. He simply stayed. When I forgot to eat, he made toast. When I doubted myself, he read my mission statement out loud until I cried. When I said I didn't know what I was doing anymore, he said, "Then let's figure it out together." One night, I told him everything. Not just about Lighthouse, about Wallace, the recital, the missed birthdays, the time he confused me with Scarlett. Finn listened. No interruptions, no platitudes. When I was done, he held my face in his hands and said, "Harper, you are not hard to love. You were just born into a place that didn't know how." That sentence stayed with me. It was the first time I realized the problem wasn't me. Amara turned out to be more than just a poet. She was wildfire, unfiltered, brutally honest, and exactly the kind of voice Lighthouse Press needed. We worked on her collection for 6 weeks. She challenged me, pushed back, fought for her lines. And when the book launched, small scale, quiet, self-distributed, it sold out in 4 days. She sent me a voice message the next night. "Harper, I didn't think I'd ever trust someone in publishing, but I trust you. Thank you for not making me shrink." I saved that message. I still listen to it sometimes when the doubt creeps back in. Then there was Riley. He offered to host a tiny reading night at the bookstore. No banners, no budget. Just 10 folding chairs, a table of paperbacks, and warm light. People came, not a crowd, but enough. Lena showed up too. Hugged me like we were sisters. She read from her newest book and introduced me as the editor who gave me my first shot. That night, as I looked around the bookstore, at the smiles, the quiet laughter, the clinking mugs, I felt something unfamiliar. Belonging. Not the kind you beg for, the kind you build, with people who choose you, not for what you achieve, but for who you are. I didn't need Wallace's praise anymore, because slowly, piece by piece, I was building a life filled with voices that didn't echo his silence. And this time, when I looked around, I wasn't invisible. I was seen, I was valued, I was loved. And not because I performed, but because I simply existed. Lighthouse Press didn't explode overnight. There was no viral moment, no headline splash, but it grew, slowly, quietly, steadily. Amara's poetry chapbook sold out within 4 days. Then we did a second print, then a third. More emails came. More writers asked to submit. The inbox, once barren and cold, began to feel like a door being knocked on, by voices ready to be heard. And this time, I was ready to answer. We didn't have a fancy office. My editorial desk was still a thrift store table in the corner of our living room, but the work felt real, rooted, needed. For the first time in my life, I was doing something meaningful on my own terms. Not because Wallace approved, not because anyone handed it to me, but because I built it, word by word, author by author, brick by brick. The letters from readers kept coming. One was from a woman in her 60s who said Amara's poem made her cry for the first time in 20 years. Another from a non-binary teen in Ohio. Your press made me feel like someone out there doesn't want me to hide. I printed that one out and taped it to the wall. Not for inspiration, for proof. Proof that I was enough. That what I created mattered, that I mattered. Finn saw it before I did. He started celebrating every small milestone like we'd won a Pulitzer. Our first bookstore partnership? He baked a cake? The day our website hit 10,000 visitors? He poured champagne into mismatched mugs and said, "To the future." I asked him once, half joking, "Aren't you tired of cheering for things no one else even notices?" He looked at me and said, "They'll notice one day, but even if they don't, I do, and that's enough for me." I couldn't speak. My throat closed up. Because in that moment I realized I had spent most of my life craving applause from someone who never looked my way. And here was a man clapping with both hands just because I tried. I still thought of Wallace sometimes. Like a bruise you forget about until you bump it again. I'd see fathers hugging their daughters, laughing in restaurants, or talking with pride about their kids' creative work. And the ache would return, but it didn't crush me anymore. It didn't paralyze me. It was just background noise. Because for the first time, the loudest voice in my life was finally mine. One night, Finn and I sat on our tiny balcony, feet up on the railing, watching dusk fall over the city. "I'm proud of you," he said softly. "Not just for the business, for being you, for still being you after everything." I turned to him and smiled. "I stopped waiting for them to choose me," I said, "and I chose myself." And in that quiet, I felt something click into place. I didn't need Wallace to see me anymore, because I had finally learned how to see myself. It arrived on a Tuesday. Of course it did. Tuesdays were always cursed. The envelope was cream-colored, thick and elegant, the kind of stationery reserved for weddings, retirements, and events where people wore judgment like perfume. My name was printed in dark embossed lettering, Harper Taylor. Not Harper and Finn, just me, no return address, no handwritten note, just the card inside. "You are cordially invited to the retirement celebration of Mr. Wallace E. Taylor. Saturday, 6:00 p.m. Formal attire requested. Speech at 7:30. I stared at the words like they were written in a language I used to understand but hadn't spoken in years. The bile rose slowly in my throat. Retirement celebration? The retirement celebration? The same one I'd heard rumors about through Scarlett's social media posts? The one Owen had casually mentioned in passing, like it wasn't a massive emotional landmine? And now, this, a single, silent invitation, a message wrapped in civility and sealed with a knife. Finn found me standing in the kitchen, invitation in one hand, mug of untouched coffee in the other. He didn't speak, just raised an eyebrow. I handed it to him. He read it, then looked at me. "You okay?" I let out a small laugh, sharp and hollow. "Do you think he sent this himself, or had Scarlett do it?" Finn didn't answer, because it didn't matter. Whoever sent it, the message was the same. Come, smile, be invisible. Let us pretend nothing ever happened. Part of me wanted to rip it in half and throw it in the trash. Another part of me hesitated, not because I wanted to go, God, no, but because I could feel the old anger stirring again. The part of me that remembered the recital, the silence, the public dismissal, the way he looked at me like I was something he had to endure. I hadn't seen Wallace in over a year, not since I stopped picking up his rare, disjointed phone calls, not since I started choosing peace over performance. But now, this was more than a party. This was a summons, a reminder, an invitation laced with the same quiet cruelty I'd grown up with. You are not part of this family, but you are expected to show up anyway. I looked at Finn. "I don't want to go," I said. He nodded. "Then we don't go." I paused. "But maybe I do. Not for him, not for them." He waited. I took a deep breath. Maybe it's time I stop letting that man decide where I belong. And just like that, the decision began to take root. Not out of hope, out of fire. The days leading up to the party felt like standing in the eye of a storm. Everything looked quiet, but I could feel the wind circling just out of sight. I kept busy, answered emails, reviewed Amara's second manuscript, took inventory of our books in Riley's shop. I even cooked dinner twice, just to stay grounded. But inside, I was a war zone of what-ifs. What if Wallace made a speech and pretended I didn't exist? What if Scarlett said something cruel in that soft, sweet voice she used to deliver knives? What if Owen looked away again? What if I froze, like I did at 12, like I did a year ago? Every night, the scenarios played on a loop in my head. Sometimes I won, sometimes I didn't. Finn didn't interrupt my spirals. He was simply there, in the silence, in the small acts, in the way he refilled my tea before I even noticed it was empty. The night before the party, I pulled out a navy blue dress I hadn't worn in years. Structured, elegant, strong, no lace, no softness. It looked like who I wanted to be. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the neckline. Finn leaned against the doorframe. "You look ready." "Do I?" I asked, turning slightly. He walked over and placed something small into my palm. A silver bracelet, simple, delicate, one word engraved inside, "Enough." I stared at it. He said, "You've always been. You just didn't always know it." I blinked fast. Not "you're amazing," not "you'll crush them," just "you are enough." That word wrapped around my wrist like armor. Later that night, we sat together on the couch. No music, no TV, just the hum of the city and the quiet between us. "I don't have a speech," I admitted. "Good," he said. "You don't need one." "I'm not sure what to expect." "You don't have to know," he said. "You just have to show up as you." I paused. "You don't have to come." Finn raised an eyebrow. I get to come. Big difference. I smiled, small, real. In the stillness, I realized I wasn't preparing to fight. I was preparing to stay whole, to not shrink, to not seek approval, to walk in, look around, and remain rooted, no matter what they saw or didn't see. This wasn't about revenge. This was about reclamation of space, of voice, of self. And tomorrow I would walk into that room, not for him, but for me. The air inside the venue was too cold. Manufactured elegance with just enough chill to make you question if you were truly welcome. I knew this place. Different lighting, different crowd, same feeling. Déjà vu wasn't just a flicker, it was a punch. I walked through the doors with Finn beside me, hand on the small of my back. This time I didn't grip his arm like a lifeline. This time I walked in on my own 2 feet. The room was full of tailored suits, champagne flutes, polite laughter, familiar faces, family, technically, strangers, emotionally. Scarlett stood near the floral archway, laughing at something a guest had said. She looked up briefly and froze when she saw me. Not fear, not guilt, just surprise. Like I'd ruined her clean narrative. Owen caught my eye, then looked away almost immediately, pretending to sip from an empty glass. Some things never changed, but some things did. Because this time I wasn't the same Harper. I didn't scan the room for Wallace's approval. I didn't shrink. Finn and I found our table. My name was on a flimsy card, far from the center, of course. Near the speakers, where you'd have to twist your neck to see the stage. Perfect. I took my seat without complaint. Finn slid my water glass toward me. You okay? I nodded. It's just a room. But we both knew it wasn't. Wallace appeared a few minutes later. Gray suit, polished smile. The same way he looked in press photos and corporate interviews. He worked the room like a politician. Handshakes, backpats, fake interest wrapped in well-timed laughter. He didn't see me right away. When he finally did, his expression didn't flicker. Not warmth, not irritation, nothing, just a nod. Like I was a colleague at a networking event. I felt my stomach twist, but only for a second, because then I remembered the bracelet on my wrist. Enough. And the twist passed. Scarlett took the mic first. Her voice was smooth, practiced. She praised Wallace's dedication to legacy, to excellence, to raising children who carry forward his values. People nodded, clapped politely. I didn't move. Then Owen spoke. A short, forgettable toast about business acumen and family pride. Then came Wallace. He stepped up to the mic with his signature calm and started talking about legacy, that word again. He spoke about Owen's financial success, Scarlett's medical brilliance, and just like last time, no mention of me. Only this time I wasn't waiting for one. I just sat there, calm, breathing, eyes steady. Let him erase me again. He could erase me from his speech, but not from the truth, and not from myself. Wallace was halfway through his speech when I knew it was coming. He praised Owen's strategic brilliance in finance. He extolled Scarlett's compassionate leadership in medicine. His words were perfectly polished, like a press release rehearsed 100 times. Then he paused, his eyes swept the room and landed on me. That same look, no warmth, no recognition, just formality, like I was a name on a list he couldn't quite delete. And then he said it. Again. Harper, you may leave now. Same cadence, same dismissal, but this time the room reacted differently. A few gasped. Some glanced awkwardly at each other. A low murmur rippled across the tables. I stood, not because he told me to, but because I was done playing the role of the silent daughter. I pushed in my chair slowly, letting the sound of it scraping the floor settle into the tension. Finn stood beside me without hesitation. Then he did something no one expected. He tapped his glass, once, twice, 3 times, clear, intentional. All heads turned. Wallace narrowed his eyes. "This is my speech, young man." Finn's voice was calm but firm. "Then consider this a necessary footnote." Gasps, a nervous laugh somewhere in the back. "I'm Finn Taylor," he said, voice carrying, "Harper's husband. And I think it's time someone spoke about her." He didn't raise his voice, he didn't point fingers, but every word landed like a stone in still water. "This woman built a company from nothing. She has launched the careers of writers who had never been heard before. She's mentored, published, edited, advocated. She's shown up for people who barely knew her name." He looked directly at Wallace. "And the one person who was supposed to know her best never even showed up." Wallace's expression hardened. Scarlett looked like she wanted to melt into the floor. Owen wouldn't meet my eyes. Finn didn't stop. "She spent years being erased. Tonight, she showed up anyway. That's courage." He looked back at me. "And I just want to say this in front of all of you. Harper, you are enough. Always have been. Always will be." The room fell into stunned silence. Then someone clapped. One beat, then another. It wasn't thunderous, but it was enough. I turned toward Finn, my voice steady. "I'm ready." He held out his hand. I took it. We walked out, not in anger, not in drama, just in truth. Wallace said nothing, and that, more than anything, told me he had finally heard me. Even if he didn't have the words to say so. The silence outside the banquet hall felt heavier than the noise inside. Finn and I walked through the parking lot without speaking. The night air pressed against my skin, crisp and grounding. I could finally hear myself breathe. Each step away from that room felt like shedding a layer of someone I no longer needed to be. We reached the car. I exhaled. He squeezed my hand gently, not congratulating me, not pitying me, just steady. And in that stillness, I realized something. Leaving didn't hurt. Staying would have. The notifications started the moment we pulled out of the lot. My phone buzzed once, then again, and again. By the time we got home, it was vibrating so constantly I thought it might catch fire. I tossed my coat onto the couch, kicked off my shoes, and opened the screen. 12 messages, 4 missed calls. Scarlett was first. "You made a scene. What is wrong with you? You embarrassed him, us, yourself. Don't think this is something you can come back from." I didn't reply. Owen, surprisingly, had 2 messages, one at 8:43 p.m., one at 9:17. First, "Why would you do that? Couldn't you just let it go for one night?" Then later, "I rewatched the video someone posted. I think you were right." I didn't know which Owen was real. Maybe neither. Maybe both. One text was from my Aunt Serena. "I wasn't there, but I heard what happened. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you." I sat down slowly, letting that one sink in. The only one who hadn't said a word was Wallace. No text, no call, no backlash, just absence. And somehow that was the clearest response of all. Finn returned from the kitchen with 2 mugs of tea. I showed him the screen. He skimmed, then handed me my mug. "You okay?" I nodded. "Better than I should be." He smiled softly. "That's what happens when you stop carrying what never belonged to you." I stared at Scarlett's final message. "If you walk away now, you're done. Don't come back when you need something." And I replied, "I didn't walk away. I walked free. There's a difference. And I don't plan on needing anything from people who don't respect me." I hit send, then I hit block. And for the first time in my life, I felt nothing but relief. It happened when I least expected it. 2 days after the party, just as my world had started to feel steady again, I was folding laundry, something mindless, comforting, when my phone rang. No name, no ID, just unknown caller. My thumb hovered over decline, but something told me to answer. Hello? A pause, then a voice I hadn't heard in over a year, except in my memories. Harper. It was him. Wallace. The name alone didn't sting like it used to. It just felt distant. Like hearing from a professor you never connected with. I hope I'm not interrupting, he said, though his tone said he didn't care if he was. I didn't answer that part. I wanted to be direct, he continued. You embarrassed me. No greeting, no question, no reflection, just that. I waited. You humiliated your own father in front of people who have known us for decades. Do you understand what kind of damage that causes? His voice was flat, but I knew that tone. It was the sound of a man accustomed to control and losing it. I understand exactly what I did, I replied. You crossed a line? No, I said. I erased one you drew around me a long time ago. A pause, a shift. You're still part of this family, he said. No, I corrected. I was born into it. That's not the same. You'll regret this, he said, sharper now. Doors will close. There it was, the real Wallace. Not the calm patriarch, but the gatekeeper, the punisher. If the price of peace is silence, I'm happy to pay it, I said softly. He scoffed. You think defiance makes you strong? No, I said, but boundaries do. Another pause. I won't stop your siblings from cutting you off. That's their call. I almost laughed. They already made that choice a long time ago. They just never said it out loud. You're walking away from everything. No, I said, I'm walking toward something. Then I added, and I hope someday you understand what that means. But I'm not waiting for you to. The line went quiet. Then he hung up. Finn stepped into the room a moment later, drying his hands. You okay? He asked. He called, I said, tried to take one last swing. And? I didn't flinch. That evening I lit a single candle, not for forgiveness, not for Wallace, but for closure, and for the girl who once would have shattered from that call. She didn't live here anymore. The woman who answered, she stood tall. She said no without yelling. She walked away without apologizing, and she never looked back. We moved to Portland that spring. It wasn't dramatic. No midnight escape, no burning bridges. Just a quiet decision made on a rainy Tuesday after lunch. Finn looked up from his laptop and said, I found a place. It's nothing fancy, but it's got good light and a little garden. I smiled. Let's go. That was it. Our new apartment had creaky floorboards and old tile in the kitchen, but it felt like home within days. There were plants on the windowsills, books stacked on every surface, laughter echoing in the hallway, no ghosts, just life. Lighthouse Press found a new rhythm too. Smaller, steadier, more intentional. I stopped chasing numbers. I started chasing meaning. We published a children's book by a local queer artist. We hosted community writing circles in parks. I spoke at a library event, not about success, but about starting anyway. For the first time, my work didn't feel like a defense. It felt like a gift. Some mornings I would sit on the porch with coffee and think, so this is what peace feels like? Not the absence of pain, just the absence of proving. My relationship with Finn deepened in ways I hadn't expected. We no longer lived in survival mode. There was space for joy. We cooked together, painted walls, fought over what kind of toaster to buy, laughed in the middle of arguments because neither of us could stay mad for long. He became more than my partner. He became my mirror, reflecting back the version of me I used to silence. We reconnected with Owen, slowly. He sent a message, then another, an apology, then a conversation. Not full reconciliation, but effort. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that mattered more. We visited Aunt Serena once a month. She made cinnamon rolls and told stories I'd never heard about my mom. About how brave she'd been before the illness dulled her light. About how Wallace used to be softer once, long before power made him brittle. "I don't excuse him," Serena said once, wiping her hands on her apron. "But I understand why he broke. The problem is, he never tried to put himself back together." That stayed with me. I didn't forgive Wallace, but I released him. Forgiveness isn't always about the other person. Sometimes it's just a way to unlock your own ribcage. And in that new life, with the scent of rosemary in the garden and a fresh manuscript in my hands, I realized something. I didn't escape my past. I outgrew it. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. Healing didn't come with candles and soft music. It came with silence I didn't know what to do with. It came when the adrenaline wore off, when the applause stopped echoing, and all that remained was me, and the quiet, me, and the weight I'd carried so long. I'd mistaken it for part of my body. It started with therapy. The appointment sat in my inbox for 3 days before I confirmed it. Even then, I almost canceled twice. Not because I didn't believe in healing, but because I didn't trust myself to unravel in front of a stranger. I showed up anyway. The office was warm, filled with plants and worn pillows. No judgment in sight. Marla, my therapist, had kind eyes and the kind of silence that made you want to fill it. I didn't cry during the first session. I didn't even talk about Wallace. I talked about work, schedules, my to-do list. Marla simply asked, "When was the last time you were still without doing something?" I didn't know the answer. Over time, the layers started peeling, not with drama, but with gentle precision. We talked about the recital, the birthdays, the times I laughed too quickly, agreed too easily, apologized for things I didn't do, because silence felt safer than rejection. We talked about how I defined love as something you earn, not something you receive. "Who taught you that?" she asked once. I said nothing, but we both knew the answer. Some sessions hurt more than I expected. There were moments I hated going back, but I went. Because somewhere along the way, I realized healing isn't soft, it's surgical. I began writing again, but not to publish. I wrote letters I never sent, to Wallace, to Scarlett, even to the version of me at 12 who had frozen on that piano bench. I started reading aloud affirmations I didn't yet believe. I'm allowed to take up space. I don't need to be useful to be loved. I'm not broken, I'm rebuilding. At first, it felt like performance. Eventually, it felt like truth. I didn't forgive Wallace, but I let go of the rope I'd been pulling on for years, the one that kept me tethered to hope that he might change. I stopped needing closure from him, because closure didn't live in his hands anymore. It lived in mine. Healing didn't erase the past. It rewrote its power over me, and that was enough. I used to think family was something you were born into, something decided for you, fixed, unchanging, unavoidable. But that wasn't true. Family, I learned, could also be chosen, built, grown, watered like a garden. Finn had always been there, but I didn't fully understand the depth of his love until the noise stopped, when the drama faded and only ordinary days remained. He didn't need me to be strong all the time. He didn't need answers, he just stayed. He stayed when I was quiet. He stayed when I was tired of trying. He stayed when I second-guessed everything I was doing. One evening, as we folded laundry together, mundane, unremarkable, I looked at him and said, "You love me like I've never been unloved." He didn't flinch, just smiled. "I love you like you were never broken in the first place," he replied. I didn't cry, I just nodded, because sometimes healing isn't dramatic. It's being believed quietly. Aunt Serena became our sanctuary. Every other weekend, we visited her little house with the overgrown garden and tea towels that never matched. She baked cinnamon rolls without measuring anything and told stories with too many tangents. But I loved every one of them. "You remind me of your mother," she said one night, handing me a warm mug. "She had a soft heart, but a sharp spine, just like you." I closed my eyes and let that truth settle into my bones. Owen surprised me. He didn't apologize with words, he apologized with time. He started showing up, inviting us to lunch, checking in, sending photos of old family vacations with a note. We didn't know what we didn't know. One night, after dinner, he stayed behind while Scarlett left early. "I should have spoken up sooner," he said. "I was scared." "I know," I replied. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement. And for now, that was enough. Then there were the people I had chosen long before. I realized I was building a new kind of family. Riley hosted a bookstore poetry night. Lena brought homemade cookies. Amara read a new piece that left half the room in tears. Afterward, we sat in a circle with mismatched chairs and warm cider. No pretense, no status, just people who'd been cracked open and were still choosing to show up whole. "I used to think family was obligation," I said aloud. Amara looked at me, and now I think it's recognition, I answered. Someone looking at you and saying, "You as you are, you belong." This was my family now. Not perfect, not blood, but honest and enough. It happened when I wasn't trying to be brave. No warning, no emotional armor, just a regular day. Finn had a checkup at a nearby clinic, and I offered to wait at the hospital cafe with a book and a cup of mediocre coffee. I was halfway through a novel when I looked up, and time paused. Wallace. He was standing near the reception counter, holding a folder, speaking with someone in a crisp gray suit. His hair was thinner, more silver than I remembered. His shoulders sloped slightly. His once commanding posture had softened into something human. I blinked, unsure if my mind was playing tricks, but no, it was him. There was no panic, no anger, no sudden urge to flee. Just a stillness, a quiet acknowledgement in my chest. There you are, and I'm not afraid anymore. He didn't see me right away, and when he did, it was brief. His eyes landed on me, widened just slightly. There was no nod, no expression, just a flicker of recognition. I held his gaze for 2 seconds. Then I looked down, turned the page of my book, and took a sip of my coffee. Not out of pettiness, not to prove anything, but because. I had nothing left to say. There was no revenge left in me, no need for confrontation. Just a quiet certainty that I no longer lived in his orbit. He didn't approach me, didn't call my name, didn't linger. After a moment, he turned and walked away, into the hallway, out of view. And just like that, it was over. No tears, no shaking hands. Just peace. When Finn returned, I told him. He studied my face. "Are you okay?" I smiled. I thought I'd feel something. I didn't. Not even anger? Especially not anger. He reached for my hand. "That's not nothing, Harper. That's healing." That night, I lit a single candle on the windowsill. Not for Wallace, not for grief, not for forgiveness, but for the part of me that used to ache for his attention. the girl who once rewrote poems hoping he'd read them, who once played piano with bleeding fingers just for a nod. She was gone, and in her place was a woman who had nothing to prove. To him, to anyone, not anymore. If someone had asked me years ago what I wanted most, I would have said, I just want them to see me. See me play piano, see me love words, see me show up over and over, hoping to be enough. But now, sitting on my porch with sunlight on my face and silence that doesn't ache, I realize I was always visible. They just refused to look. I've spent most of my life trying to earn a seat at a table I was born into. I watered down my voice, softened my edges, waited to be acknowledged, waited to be claimed. But the most powerful thing I ever did was to stop waiting. Healing didn't look like victory. It didn't come with trumpets or apologies or teary reunions. It came in ordinary ways. A text I didn't send, a dinner I didn't dread, a boundary I held without shaking, a morning I woke up and didn't feel broken. That was enough. I won't lie, there are still moments I think about Wallace, not out of longing, but out of reflection. I wonder if he'll ever understand what he lost. If he ever looks at Scarlett and Owen and realizes that love built on fear is just quiet cruelty in disguise. But I don't need his answer anymore, because I found my own. I found love that speaks softly but never disappears. I found work that doesn't need to impress to matter. I found friendship that isn't performance. And most importantly, I found myself. Not the version shaped by expectations. Not the girl who flinched when someone said, "You're too sensitive," but the woman who now says, "Yes, I am," and that's my strength. If you're reading this and your heart feels heavy, if you've ever sat in a room full of people and felt like a ghost, this is for you. You don't need permission to walk away. You don't need approval to take up space. You don't need to keep proving you deserve love. You already do. Not because you're perfect, but because you exist. And that is reason enough. I didn't fix my family. I didn't become their favorite, but I became my own. And maybe that was the point all along. I always thought the end would feel louder, like a door slamming, like a declaration, like closure wrapped in clarity. But the real end was quiet. It came in the form of a morning like any other. Finn asleep beside me, sunlight on the floor, birdsong, no pain, no expectation, just stillness. It had been a year since the party, 10 months since the last message from Scarlett, 6 months since my final session with Marla. No milestones, no grand finale. Just life unfolding in the most ordinary, beautiful way. I was in the garden when I found out, kneeling in the dirt, replanting lavender that had wilted in the last rain. My hands were covered in soil, my hair in a messy knot. Finn stepped onto the porch holding the mail. "There's a letter for you," he said, eyes wide. "From, well, you should read it." It wasn't from Wallace. It was from the hospital. A note from a nurse, simple, respectful. "Mr. Wallace Taylor passed peacefully last week. We found this card in his wallet." Inside was a worn piece of paper. My first published article, folded in quarters, edges softened by time. No note, no explanation, just that. I sat on the porch steps for a long time, not crying, not hurting, just thinking. And then I got up and went back to planting lavender. Life didn't stop. Lighthouse Press launched a new mentorship program. Finn and I started talking about adopting. Amara published her second book. Riley got engaged. At one of our Friday night circles, someone asked, "What does closure feel like?" I thought for a moment, then said, "Like the moment you stop looking for the exit, because you realize you're already outside." They nodded, and I smiled. A few weeks later, I stood at a podium at a small conference. The topic was resilience and storytelling. The room wasn't full, but the energy was real. I ended my talk with this: we don't all get to rewrite our beginnings, but we all get to choose how the next chapter goes. And sometimes surviving isn't the end, it's just the beginning of everything else. If this story felt like a mirror, if you've ever been overlooked, silenced, or made to feel like you had to earn love, you're not alone. Tell me in the comments, what was the moment you finally chose yourself? Or are you still searching for it? Your voice matters here, and if no one ever told you this before, you are already enough. Hit like if this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories that speak to the strength behind soft hearts.